Hey nerds, this is Just Out to Sea with Quinton. And I just got through seeing Pixels, and for the theater that I visit, this was the very last show before they take it off the roster. So I saw the very last show, and I really needed to see it. Pixels is a movie that, if you're a gamer, if you're a nerd, is important, though not exactly a piece of film glory. It actually makes me kind of sad because there was a word that I was thinking of all throughout the film. Thinking, or trying to wrap my head around it. I couldn't figure out the phrase, right? And then right in like the last few minutes, it hit me. Wish fulfillment. Pixels is a needless wish fulfillment, unfortunately. And I laughed. There were funny parts to it. There were even parts of the movie as a gamer I couldn't deny. It resonated with me. But I feel like it's not what the culture needs right now. It's kind of telling the world, yeah, we're proud to be gamers, that sort of thing. But it's also saying that we're gonna be discriminated against, but we're vastly underappreciated, right? Adam Sandler's character was almost a competitive video gaming champion, but he's only in second place in the 80s. His friend, who was no good at video games and is seen as incompetent actually at his job, is actually the president of the United States. But he still lets his friend come into the White House and, hang out, I guess. Like, he seems like a really incompetent president because, he hasn't spent time doing the right things. It's like a common trope throughout the whole movie of that. Kind of like how people would make fun of George Bush for golfing while, Katrina happened, something like that. It was kind of like, hey, we're getting invaded by aliens. You're making cakes. What? Why? Right? But the thing was, for at least half the film, all the military and people in positions of power didn't respect the people who eventually saved the day, right? These gamers. And they were even talking about the fact that, a skill in terms of being a gamer that you're going to get is, awesome hand-eye coordinations and problem-solving skills. And that sounds great. But, they're kind of like, at the end of the day, it's a useless skill now. And something that gamers have really had to try to combat is that kind of thing of you're needlessly wasting your time. And it's very interesting because there's this line, and there's a lot of classic video game creators, or at least one I remember. I think it was the guy who created Centipede. I can't remember. I'll Google him. Hopefully I can leave a link in the comments. But he said that he doesn't like story-driven video games, which is kind of funny considering there's actually a scene in the film where they're playing The Last of Us, and there's this whole debate. It's like, where's the numbers? How can I calculate and, beat the game, because stuff like Pac-Man and stuff in that era was much harder, or seemingly harder, because, at an arcade, you had quarters. You couldn't just continue pressing restart. And as games were appealed to kids more often than anyone else at the time, or were targeted at kids, or seemed to be targeted at kids at the very least, of course, people who were playing video games a lot, i.e. kids, they can only play for so long until home consoles are created. But I'm not trying to give you a history of video gaming as a culture. My point is, there's a disparity. There are, I guess you could say, a classic video game person who's like, oh, it should be arcade style all the way, you don't need story, it's just, you and the machine. And then, of course, there's someone like me, for example, or, there's this huge subset of gamers who are like, hey, I want gaming to be an art form. I think gaming is an art form, and I want to play games that make me feel a certain way, not just, take up my time. Last of Us being a perfect example of a game I think ends like a book. It feels like a cohesive piece of an experience. I don't even want to say oh, this is the form in which it needs to be, which is why video games being adapted into movies sometimes doesn't work, just simply because they're two different mediums, and the ability to participate in what's happening inside the game is wholly different than being a spectator in a film. As a filmmaker, I definitely know how important that is. That being said, honestly, Pixels is a huge amount of narcissism, and I think as nerds and as gamers, if we're going to take ourselves seriously in the world, we need to have respect for ourselves and everyone else, and not, I don't want to say not have our heads in the clouds. What I want to say is we need to look at ourselves as a respectable culture, and Pixels, I think, works against that. I think Pixels is a film celebrating, being a nerd and liking video games and still being, an important person in the world. You love what you love, and that makes you who you are, and that makes you a likable person, right? But the thing is, Pixels, I think, is celebrating a little too early, because we've come a long way and video games are celebrated and things like that, but we as a culture discriminate within our own culture. People who mostly play Madden, Call of Duty, there are huge circles of gamers who do not respect that, and I have been one of those people, and I try more and more not to be one of those people. And I think there are people who don't consider themselves gamers who game cell phone games. If you play cell phone games, you're a gamer. If all you play is Candy Crush, I think you're a gamer. I think we need to expand the definition. There's a bunch of people on YouTube who agree with me. I'll leave some links to some of those videos down below. But getting back to Pixels itself as a movie, it's gonna go down, I feel like, as kind of a blip on the radar. It's kind of a random summer comedy movie. You can kind of lose yourself in, but I don't think we should be trying to lose ourselves when we watch something like Pixels, especially because it's really feeding into this self-aggrandizing view of ourselves as a culture. And I don't think we're there yet enough to truly celebrate, when we still have stuff like Gamergate, and when we still have problems with feminism and having female characters in video games, when we still need to have a public image that isn't the guy or girl sitting in their parents' basement playing video games all day for 12 hours, not doing anything with their lives. I think those paradigms or those views are still held and widely believed, and I don't think Pixels does enough to address that. And I think a lot of its comedy uses these tropes of people who are wasting their lives on video games. We have the guy living with his grandma. We have the guy who doesn't even play video games anymore, and video games basically kind of ruined his life, apparently. We have a guy who was really smart, actually. He became a hacker because he loved hacking games, because he loved cheating when he played video games, and he went to jail for it. But they all get redeemed in being able to save the world from aliens that are supposed to be video game enemies. I really, really wanted to like this movie in a really proud way. I wanted to say, hey, this movie matters, and it's going to open a lot of people's eyes to the validity of gaming or gamers as something you can say you are. Sorry I'm stuttering so much. I try to always do these on one take, no editing. But man, I don't know, it made me so sad to watch this movie just because there's so much genuine enthusiasm, in this movie. And as someone who identifies as a nerd or a gamer, I think a lot of people are gonna enjoy the film in a very junk foody way. It makes you feel self-important. And I think we should definitely have self-esteem, but I think that we're tooting our own horn. We need to come a long way. And what I typically tell people when people were asking me before, when Pixels was first coming out, when they see, wearing like a Zelda shirt or something like that, you can tell I'm a gamer, right? Generally. People will ask me, what do you think about Pixels? I'll say, hey, Pixels is something that I'm not really behind. I kind of think of it as kind of like the Jersey Shore of video game culture movies. But soon, one of my favorite books that has a lot to do with being a nerd and being a gamer and being obsessed with such things is gonna come out. I don't know the release date, but Ready Player One is gonna be directed by Steven Spielberg, and I'm extremely, extremely excited to see that film. I think that will be the film that kind of will do what I wanted Pixels to do. Also, if you guys are interested, I'm going to leave in the comments a couple of movies that do take little bits of video game culture or celebrate video game culture in ways that are a little bit less obnoxious than Pixels. I'm sure a lot of people are going to assume, yeah, Scott Pilgrim, right? Of course, I'll put that on the list too. But there are a lot of other movies that celebrate video games in more of a respectful way and not so much increasingly narcissistic as time goes on. Like the movie starts it starts in a good place. Like the first 30 minutes, I think it's going in a good direction in terms of how it's setting up the characters and having these tropes, having characters that love gaming or are seen negatively because of their gaming, and trying to make them feel like they're going through a journey to feel important and to have weight in the world and still love what they love is great. But I think at the end of the day, it loses itself and it gets its head up its own ass. Sorry for the shaking. I'll see you nerds later. Just think critically about things, be reflective, and just try not to get lost in your media. Try not to get lost in your media this week. That's what I'm gonna ask you guys. If you have anything to say about Pixels, what you thought, I'd love for you to leave it in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.